Hey guys, hi everyone. Good morning everyone. Hello guys, hi everyone. Good morning Adil. Good morning Ankit. Good morning Pramod. Good morning everyone. I hope I'm audible as well as visible. Am I? Good morning everyone. Good morning. Good morning Ankit. Good morning. So I can see people are joining, but as of now there are only 9 people who have joined. So let's wait 1 or 2 minutes for the rest of the people to join, and then accordingly we are going to start our class. Good morning Alka. Good morning. So we are currently discussing our React. We have discussed few very important topics in React. And today's class, as I said already, is going to be one of the most important classes in entire React. Why? Because today we will actually understand why we are using React and why, how actually we can implement dynamicality in our React web applications. So please put a message in your WhatsApp group, ask students to join as soon as they can, so that we can start with our class. Everyone, please do that. Not everyone, but few only. So in the meantime, let me set up the environment, right? And then we can start. Good morning everyone. Good morning, hello. Good morning. Good morning, Sumit. Good morning, Said. Good morning. Good morning, Akash. Good morning, everyone. So let me put a message in the WhatsApp group and then we can start. Allow me a minute only. Perfect. Walaikum salam, Sadi. Good morning, Sumit. Good morning, Akash. Good morning, everyone. So I think as of now, only 20 students have joined, which is not a good number because there are almost more than 300 students in our WhatsApp group, and unfortunately, people are not joining. So we have to implement a little bit of filter there, which we will do. I will do today or tomorrow. And even if I get only 20 students, but I should be completely aware about whom those 20 students are, right? So that's what we have to understand. But I will see. I will implement a filter later on, and I might need some help from few of the students. If you guys, some of your students are very much interested in that, I will make you admins, and let's please implement some filter on our WhatsApp groups. Okay? कोई help करेगा उसमें? Good morning, Virendra. Good morning, Amit. Good morning. Good morning. So I guess we can start our session, right? Shall we? Shall we start, guys? 20 is a very small number, right? And that too on Sunday. Nasir says definitely. Nasir, please text me. I think you can help me a little bit. ठीक है ना? So I will make you admin of that group and let's filter out some students. Let's remove those. Good morning, good morning, good morning, Abdul. Good morning. Perfect. I guess we can start our session. Okay. See, I guess the students who have joined, you have been part of this React, you have watched this React both sessions, right? You have attended both sessions, if I'm not wrong. Exactly. That's very much appreciable, Abdul, because I know you have a different time zone. So right now the time over there would be around 5 a.m. Yes, I completely know that. And I will take care of that. Maybe from next week we will try to shift the class, maybe little bit by 1 or 2 hours, okay, for all those students that have a different time zone. So I will take care of that, don't worry. Only today's class, let's little bit manage for today's class, but from next class we will try to see what best time will fit for most of the students to attend it properly, comfortably. Okay, that's what we are going to do from the next Sunday. Thank you so much, S25. I'm not sure what your name is, but thank you so much. Perfect. See, from our last two classes, we have discussed very important properties of React, right? We understood basic properties, virtual DOM, what React is and what React is not. But a simple question that I would ask over here is that when we talk about JavaScript, React is a JavaScript library, right? We all know that. My question is, why do we use JavaScript in web development? Like, what is the need of using JavaScript in web development? Good morning, Chandrika. Good morning, Anil. What is the need of using JavaScript? Everyone knows the answer so that we can implement dynamicality in our web applications, right? But the question is, whatever we have discussed until now, whatever concepts, whether that was props, JSX, creating component based architecture, any kind of thing, do you think for a second we have implemented dynamicality? Of course not. We have not. The concepts that we have learned, whether we talked about props, transferring props from one component to another component, repeating the components, reusing the components, once we are live in our web applications output, the view in the output is static. It's not dynamic. So it means even though we have learned few of the components, few of the concepts inside React, but we have not learned the most important concept inside our React, which is how to bring dynamicality inside our web application. And when we say dynamicality, can anyone give me a best definition of what dynamicality is? Anyone in the chat? In the meantime, let me try to trigger my server. So please put some definition of dynamicality in your output, in the chat, I mean. Right? What is dynamicality? Dynamicality simply means that we have a website that is live in the output. Now, based on users' actions that user will perform on a website, if website is responding to the user's action, then we say website is dynamic. Very good, Akash. Maybe I will click. So when I click, do something. So it is accepting users' actions that we are performing. And to those actions, it's actually bringing some dynamicality inside our web application. Now, if you remember your pure JavaScript, if you remember your DOM, over there, we simply say we use document.get element by ID. We tell it, okay, on click, do this. We add event listeners, so on and so forth. Similarly, I want to create the same web application over here. So let me try to control X this and let me try to paste it here inside my app.txt. What I actually want to do is I simply want to create a small problem here. Try to understand. Please remember the concept that I am about to teach is the most important concept. Everything will revolve around this concept. Everything, at least 90% of React is this concept. And because of this concept, you can create a wonderful web application. Okay, because our agenda eventually is to create dynamic websites. That's why we are learning JavaScript, right? And that's why we are going to learn our React as well. Okay. Now over here, I have a simple agenda that in this case, I will have a h1 tag where I am going to have a count variable and which is going to be 0 by default as of now. Initial value will be 0. Then I will simply go create a button and this button simply says increment. Okay, simple problem. Now, if you look at the output that we have, what I want to create is I simply want that when I click on this, each and every single time it should add 1 to the 0. So it should be 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, so on and so forth. That's what I want, right? How do we do that? How can we achieve it? The first and the basic approach and basic intuition in your mind should be that let's make this 0 a variable, right? So what we can do is we can simply go here. The basic approach will be we will simply say var count is equals to 0, like this. And then I will simply go and access this particular 0 as count. Yes or no? Right? So I will simply go write count. And if I right now check the output, you can still see count is equals to 0. Very good. So our first answer to this is instead of making it static 0, let's make it a variable 0 so that we can actually access this variable and bring changes in it. Very good. After that, what is it that we want? When I click on that button, whatever content inside count is, add 1 to it each and every single time. So which means I will add an on-click event. So I will simply go add an on-click event over here. And let's suppose I will call a function and that will be handle increment. Okay. So let me create a function with the name of handle increment like this. Now in this case, let me define this function. So function handle increment is a simple function in which what am I going to do? Can you guys tell me in the chat what am I supposed to do so that Every single time, whenever I click on this increment, it's going to add 1 to it. You will simply say, please, sir, do one thing, make count is equals to count plus 1. Do you think this is what the first answer comes up in our mind? Leave if you know React, leave that. Let's suppose you don't know React, right? But if I talk about from the JavaScript perspective, from whatever we have been learning from day one, we would say this is what we would want. This is what we would do, right? Simple. If I right now go to the output, my expectations are that when I click on this increment, it should simply add 1 to it. And if I click on this, you can clearly see there is no change. Does it mean it's not bringing changes in this count variable? Does it mean it is not actually updating this count with 1? Maybe not. Let's go over here. Let me simply go say console.log, and I want you to tell me what count is each and every single time. So let's go, or even instead of it calling it here, because I will call it inside function. Let me call it inside function like this. Done. After that, I will simply go inside the inspect, and I will simply go inside the console. By default, the count is 0. Pay close attention. This is something that you need to understand. I will not start state directly. I will tell you what the issues are, why we need state. Why can't we use normal, conventional approach? That's very important to understand here. As of now, it is 0, and that's why when I click on this, you can see it becomes 1. When I click on it, it becomes 2. When I click on it, it becomes 3. So every single time, actually, function is doing the what it is supposed to do. Function is every single time updating my count with 1. Then what is the issue, sir? Why are we not able to see 0 to 1, then 1 to 2, 2 to 3, even though it's updating the count? So what is the issue? The answer is very simple. And over here, you need to understand there are two things that we should keep in our mind whenever we talk about dynamicality with respect to our React. Whenever. And what are those two things, sir? We created our variable like this, count is equals to 1. And we all can agree it is nothing but a local variable. Okay, it's a local variable that we have. The handle increment function that we had, actually the intention of this handle increment was to every single time add 1 to the variable, and it's doing that. It's incrementing our local variable. So local variable is being incremented every single time. So if it is being incremented every single time, so what is the issue? There are two things that are preventing the change from being visible. The change that we are trying to look in the output, there are two things that are preventing, and these are the two things that mostly are important. That's what state mean as well. That is the real definition of state. Number one is, whenever we talk about local variables, always remember in React, local variable don't persist between renders. Let's go back a little bit to our day one when we discussed virtual DOM. Guys, do we remember what virtual DOM is? That every single time, whenever we want to bring a change, a copy will be created, diffing algorithm will happen, reconciliation will happen, and change will be visible. Now, whenever that change is visible, we call that it is re-rendering. Re-rendering is happening. So in this particular case, we want 0 to change to 1. Don't you think in order to bring this change visible, it means we are supposed to do re-rendering? Yes or no? Of course, we are supposed to do that. React is supposed to do that. But always remember that when this re-rendering happens, local variables that we have, they don't have that power that they will persist between these re-rendering that's happening. So when React renders this component a second time, for example, if you look at this particular component which is in the output, in order to bring change, in order to make 0 to 1, what is React supposed to do? It is supposed to render it again second time. Yes or no? Of course, yes. But when it renders it second time, it starts it from the scratch. It renders it from the scratch, which means somehow, let's suppose for our discussion, it actually re-renders it. But when it re-renders it, it will re-render the whole component, which means when it re-renders it, at that point of time, count will again be set to 0 for the re-rendering, although it's not doing the re-rendering. But I'm telling you, let's assume it's doing the re-rendering. Count will still be 0. So this local variable that we have, it does not behave like a memory. Memory means that if there are multiple re-rendering happening, that whatever the updated values are going to be, they must be persisted between multiple re-rendering. And that's not what local variables suppose. That's number one reason that we have. I hope that makes sense. Second thing is, now simple logic. We have 0. Their count is equal to 0. Now we want that when we click on it, it should be changed to 1. Now, in order to make this 1, don't you think there should be something that is supposed to trigger a re-render? That is supposed to tell this component, hey, there is a change, make re-rendering, trigger a re-rendering, right? That's supposed to be someone, right? But unfortunately, local variables that we have, whenever we bring change to those local variables, so changing local variables won't trigger re-rendering. Changing local variables won't trigger re-rendering. And we know, unless and until there is no re-rendering that's happening, change won't be visible. So it does not matter how much events you put. If you are making changes to local variable, it cannot trigger a re-rendering. So there must be a mechanism. React at this point of time does not realize that it needs to render the component again with the new data. So am I clear with two problems? What two problems we have? Number one is local variables do not persist between renders. And also when we do changes to local variables, it won't trigger re-rendering. So these are the two problems. Now, if we want to solve this problem, don't you think we have a solution where we simply need that somehow it should retain the data between renders? This is simply solution to number 1 point. Second thing is it should trigger React. Somehow there should be a mechanism so that we can trigger React to render the component. Render the component with new data. Which means re-rendering. So if this is the problem, this is the solution. So somehow we have to find a way so that if re-rendering happens, my React should be able to retain the data between renders. Not only that, if it is able to retain, there should be some mechanism with the help of which we should be able to trigger the re-rendering that we have. Are these the solutions? I want a quick answer in the chat. Quick answer. Done? Very good. And that's what actually we have as 7th property of React, which is state management. State management. We learned a lot of properties, and trust me, we are still learning properties only. React comes up with one of the fantastic properties, and it is called state management. We cannot control that, although we can create setter functions and all those things on our own, but we don't do that. That's a very lengthy process, Sayed. But we have some solutions. React is declarative, so we already have a solution. We will write that only, right? But leave that. I'm not going to talk about solution as of now. We are going to talk about a property of React called as state management. What does state management mean? Whenever you create a React application, we know inside React application, we will have components. React says there is a way for every single component you can assign memory to it. Through which it can remember things, it can bring changes to it, it can remember one past thing, it can remember future thing as well, but it depends on the lifecycle methods, leave that. But the point is that we have a state management thing of a components of this application where those state management will behave as memory to those components that we have. So it is simply that state is nothing but a component's memory. So if we create a component, we can associate a memory to it. And when we talk about memory, what does memory mean? जो हम याद रख सकते हैं. अगर इसमें change करेंगे, we should be able to remember the change as well. So that's what memory means. And with help of this memory, you can bring any type of dynamicity, anything inside your web application. And when we talk about state management, we have a method. There are a lot of ways of implementing state management. We have a Redux, we have use reducer hook, we have useState, a lot of things over there, right? But basic one is we have a method called as useState. Now, some of you might already know that it's a hook. We will not look it at from the perspective of hook at this point of time. We will look it from the perspective of memory. So when we talk about use state method, use state hook, this use state actually provides these two things. That use state will actually return you something with the help of which you can retain the data between renders. Use state will return you something with the help of which it will allow React to trigger something so that it can trigger the re-rendering. So what does use state do? Syntax is very simple. That use state is a function. So we will simply call our use state like this. It is a function. And it is supposed to return two things as an array value. So we will simply destructure those two things into two variables. For example, I will simply write state here. It's a variable name. You can write it anything. It's an identifier. And second will be set state like this. Okay, it's again a variable identifier. You can name it anything. And over here goes initial value. This is the syntax of the state. Why are my state over there? The state variable. This is called state variable. It's called state variable. This will solve you the first problem. What was the first problem? To retain the data. So this state variable will actually allow your web application to retain data between multiple renders, between different renders, between two renders. In the similar way, when we talk about set state, this is called state setter function. It is called state setter function. And this will be responsible. This second variable will be responsible for solving your second problem, which is it will allow my React to trigger re-rendering. So do we have a solution? Yes, we have a solution. And when we implement this thing in our component, we say now component has a memory. With help of that memory, we can bring any dynamicality. Let's see a very simple example of it. So I will simply try to comment this code because this is not the solution. So let me quickly go and comment this code that we have done. After that, similarly, I will go and write my two things. Number one is count, and second thing is going to be set count is equals to use state. Now, always remember that in order to use any kind of functionality or any kind of hook later on, it must be imported from React. If you do not import this use state from React, it's not going to work. Now, you guys tell me, based on this curly braces, is this named import or default import? Quickly tell me. This use state, it's curly braced import. Is it named import or default import? Quickly tell me in the chat. Also, if you see the syntax, the bracket, the argument that we pass to use state is initial value. Whatever the initial value you want give to state, in our example, count was supposed to be 0. So initial value is going to be 0. So whatever your initial value that you want your website to render in the first render, that's what your initial value is, which is supposed to be 0. Now, after that, let me remove this on-click function. As of now, you can clearly see I have created a use state. Always remember, it returns two variables. It returns an array, and in that array, I am destructuring two values. Number one is state variable. Number two is state setter function. It's a function. And why this will behave like a variable, which means this is your memory and this is a function, this is a method with help of which it will give you a way to update this memory each and every single time, depending on how you call it. As of now, if I go to my output, you can clearly see count is 0. Or even if I go here, let me write use state is equals 10, we can clearly see in the output count became 10. So it is again the same variable that we have. Now, what are we supposed to do? We are simply supposed to each and every single time when I click on increment, it is supposed to add 1 to it. So let me define the function handle increment quickly, and in this function I will simply tell it. Now over here I will not make count is equals to count plus 1. No, I won't do that. Why? Because remember, count is not a variable. It's not a normal variable. It's not a local variable that you are adding. It is a state variable. So it cannot be used as a local variable inside your web application. Okay. But there is a method that actually allows you to update the count. So if you want to update the count, this is the method that you are going to use. You cannot write count is equals to count plus 1. So I will simply tell it set count with count plus 1. So I am simply telling it update my count with whatever the value of count at this point of time is in my state management, add 1 to it. So you can see it will simply go and update the values properly. And now, don't you think it has done both things? It has retained the value between multiple renders, and we have triggered the re-rendering as well. Yes or no? Yes or no? Every single person. Come on, guys, quickly in the chat. Right? So we can completely understand one thing. Now, there's a question. One of the interview questions. And I would like you to give it a try. Let's suppose you are right now sitting in an interview. How is this count actually updating, even though it's constant variable? How is it updating itself? Come on, guys. Good morning, Samit. Good morning. How is this count updating itself? You can see it was 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. Even though it's constant, but how is it updating? Anyone have any good answers to it? Or even give me a guess. Give me a guess. There can be two possible answers to it. Although there's only one correct, but two possible answers. If you give any one of them, I will accept. Think about it and tell me. Global scope? No. Global scope does not have to do anything with updation or redeclaration. Automation updation. Nanny, that's something that I am expecting, but elaborate it a little bit more. See, you need to understand one thing here. Doesn't treat it as a constant. Let's understand one thing here. Let me tell you the solution. First of all, I am writing JSX here, right? What am I writing? JSX. Does my browser understand what JSX is? Does my browser know what JSX is? Of course not. Browser does not know what JSX is. That's why it will convert into proper JavaScript later on. And we use a proper thing there that's called, someone put in the chat. I don't remember the name exactly right now. So first of all, this is JSX. Browser does not understand JSX. Browser will convert. We know we have a Webpack. So it will create JavaScript bundle out of it, right? And that's what will happen. But leave that. That's not the answer. Babel, exactly. Very good, Anil. Babel. Babel is what's responsible for converting this into proper JavaScript. But leave that. That's not the answer. See, when we talk about this count and set count, I'm not creating them as variables. Try to understand this. I am simply telling it that every single time this method is called, whatever it returns, destructure them into these two variables. So when you call set count, it is updating count because of this method, which is useState, because of this hook. And then it returns again count and set count with new values. So I am not updating count variable here. No, I am updating state in the state management of useState. So useState is responsible for updating it. So count is not being updated, but useState every single time returns new instances of it. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Yes or no? Give me a quick confirmation to this. This is one of the most important questions that might be asked in interviews. If it is a constant count, how am I able to update it? If it would have been a constant count variable, then we would have not been able to update it because constant variables cannot be updated. But when we call set count over there, it actually runs internally state management. And over here, useState updates the state and then useState returns the instances. So count and set count are the instances or the return part of my useState that we have. So useState updates it. Count is same every single time. The point is useState is actually returning every single time whatever the current state is. Initially, current state was 0, but when I call it with set count, at that point of time, current state becomes 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. And that's what is being returned by the useState. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So please remember that in your mind. So it's not a count constant. Do never say that we are actually updating count. No. Basically, what happens, I will click on this increment idle, right? As soon as I click on this increment function, it is going to call this particular function that we have. It called the function. Then it is going to execute this particular method with help of which I'm simply telling it update my count. But am I telling it update this? No, I am actually telling it that via state management, update my current state with 2. So it's updating state. Now, when it updated state from 0 to 1, then that 1 is being returned from use state and count becomes 1. And that's what we see over here. So each and every single time, it actually returns things. I hope this makes enough sense. So I'm not updating count, but it's state management that's doing it. Am I clear? Am I clear, guys, everyone? I hope this makes sense. And this is one of the correct answers that you can actually give in an interview. So please make sure that you note this answer properly down. Okay. Moving a little bit forward. Now we have understood what state is. We have understood small meaning of what state is. Now, one very important point here. What type of argument can we pass here? Like instead of saying count is equals to count plus 1, right? Pratimesh, I will come to that in a second. What if we write return count? We will never do that because that's not how states work, right? If I write set count with 2, is this a valid syntax? My question. Is this a valid syntax? Of course, yes. In this case, I am telling my state management, whenever this function will be called, whatever my current state is, replace that by 2. But it's a static value 2, so it will only update it with 1. So when once I click on this, it will be 2. But if I click on it again, what will happen? It will again update it with 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Every single time it's making it 2. So whatever argument you pass over here, that's what your updated state becomes. So if I write count plus 1, at that point of time, it behaves like a memory. It behaves like a memory because it is dependent on your current state. So whatever your current state is, add 1 to it. That's why we can see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, one very important thing. Always remember that my state is responsible for 2 things. Always remember that. Even if anyone says, what is the definition of state? Tell it it's a memory and then tell it what actually the reasons of it is. Those 2 reasons, retain and re-rendering. Now, what do we mean by re-rendering? If I go here, if I simply say console.log, and let me simply say console.log adfer, okay? And then I will go here and try to understand what re-rendering is. If I refresh my page, once I refresh my page, this whole component will be updated, will be rendered, will be placed in actual DOM, and it will actually print adfer console.log adfer in the output. We can clearly see adfer. Now, my question to all of you is, if I again click on this, do you think it will re-render only this part or it will re-render the whole component? That's what my question is. Will it re-render the whole component or will it re-render this small part only? What's my question? What's my question? And what's the answer? Come on, guys. I will teach that. That's our next class's topic. Ignore that at this point of time. Sayed says only count part. Only count part. Back to code. This is the code. Please look at it. Console.log adfer is part of this component, app component, right? And then I will simply go here. You can clearly see this is my function. So when I click on it, it simply executes this function, right? And then count plus 1. My question is that once it triggers the re-render, will it actually re-render the whole component or will it re-render the small count part only? What do you think? If I go to my output, if I click on increment, you can clearly see adfer again. If I click once, you can clearly see adfer again every single time. That's what re-rendering means. Although we can resolve this, there are proper techniques with help of which we can actually increase the efficiency. At this point of time, we are not looking at it from the perspective of efficiency. We will see efficiency at the end once we learn a lot of React. Those will be also discussed. But at this point of time, understand re-rendering means whole component. Okay, re-rendering means whole component. Okay, that's one point. Second point is, as of now, we can see I am writing count, second count, set count, right? Count, set count. The convention is to name this pair like this, X and set X, Y and set Y. But that is not the rule. You could name it anything you like, whatever you want. But React says follow the conventions. So if you write your state variable adfer, make it set adfer here. If you write it X, make it set X. So there's no like we don't have any rule here. But convention is this. Okay. So the conclusion, if you want to write it down, every time your components, useState gives you array containing two values. That's why we say it is not actually updating count. So when you re-render the whole component, this useState will actually return you an array containing two variables. Number one is state variable with the value you stored. Second one is state setter function, which can update the state variable and trigger the React to render the component again. I hope this makes sense. Am I clear? Done. Moving a little bit forward. Now, can we implement multiple states? Of course, we can. Maybe over here, I have another h1 tag where there's a name, and this name is nothing but a state. So, can my component have multiple states? Let me simply create a state with the name of text, set text is equals to, I will simply go say use state, and over here the initial name will be Adfar. Okay, so over here I will simply go write my state as text. Now what I want is that when I simply click on this button, it will simply say change. Now when I click on this Adfar should become Rashid. It should become Rashid. So on that I will simply say on click, please go and call a function like this where you are simply going to set your text to Rashid. So our component can have multiple states as well. Of course, it's allowed. So it's not like your component can have only one state. No, one memory part. No, there can be 100 states as well, 200 states as well, depending on your requirement. So now if I go here and if I click on this change, you can clearly see it becomes Rashid, and it re-renders the whole component. That's why you could see Adfar there. If I click on this again, change, you can see Adfar being called. So it re-renders the whole component. I hope this makes also sense. Am I clear? Moving a little bit forward. Now, there is one of the most important concepts now. Okay. And that is also very important related to interviews. See, I will teach you the essence of state later on, like why we can use state, how good it is. But at this point of time, there's a concept that we have to discuss called as state batching and state scheduling. And let's try to understand what that concept is. Let me remove this whole code and let me put it inside my app.txt. I think I am doing one mistake here. Let me create a new folder inside my src, which I will name as state. Okay. And then inside state, I will simply go and rfce. Inside state, I will create my first file. Let's suppose I will simply call it counter.js. Now, what this counter is supposed to do, it's simply supposed to have a counter. Please try to understand this. So I will simply say count is equals to 0 like this, and let me create a state for it. So count comma set my count is equals to, I will simply use state and make sure you import it, and initial value is 0. Done. Now instead of this 0, I will simply go make it as my count variable. Done. After that, I will simply go create a button, and on this button I will simply say add, right? And then I will simply have an on click event, and on this on click event I will simply call a function called as handle click. And let me define the same function here, handle click, and like this, like this, like this, like this, while it's simply supposed to add count to it. Simple, same function which I did. And let me call my counter here. So let me call my counter component quickly here, like this. Done. And if I right now go to my output that we have, we can clearly see my application is properly working, right? But as of now, there's one point, write it down on your rough copy. Always remember, React is isolated. React is isolated and it is private to a component, which means that I can reuse my component. What if I call my component multiple times? If I call my component multiple times, we will have multiple counters here. The question is, if I make a change in one state, will it affect the rest of the components? The answer is no. It is private to that particular component only. React state is isolated. It is private to that particular component. If I make a change here, it will be reflected to this component only. It will be reflected to this component only. It will be reflected to this component only. And note this point down. But I am here to discuss one another topic. As of now, I will create, instead of saying add directly, I will go and say add 4. Which means, sir, please provide all your lecture playlist because I'm new joiner. Sure, I will do that on our WhatsApp group. Okay, I will do that. See, I have a button, and the button's text is add 4. So what am I going to do? My intention is that every single time when I click on this button, it should simply add 4 to my already current state. The first way is I will simply say count plus 4. And if I go right now here and if I click on this, you can clearly see every single time the increment is by 4. But that's not the the concept that I'm actually talking about. The concept is I want to go here and I want simply write count plus 1, count plus 1, count plus 1, count plus 1. So if I try to update my state like this, what will happen here? What do you think? Will it update my count with 4? Anyone? What will happen in this case? What do you think? If I do set count, count plus 1, set count, count plus 1, set count, count plus 1, set count, count plus 1. Irrespective of what the answer is, but according to the code that I have written, we all can guess that it should actually update it by 4. But that's not what will happen, of course. If I go here, you can clearly see it does not matter how many set counts I write in this format which I have implemented, count plus 1, count plus 1, count plus 1, count plus 1. It's only updating it every single time by 1 only. And remember, trust me, this is the most important interview question from state. They won't ask you like, tell me the syntax of state. They will ask you, hey, explain what state batching is, what state scheduling is. Okay, please try to understand that, because set count works as async. Let me tell you the answer. At this point of time, we all can agree this is what we are trying to create. Pay close attention. The function handler that I have, so let me create the function. So I have function handle click, and in this function I am writing set count, count plus 1. I am writing set count, count plus 1. I am writing set count, count plus 1. I am writing 1 again, set counts, count plus 1. So let me quickly go and write set count is equals to count plus 1. This is what I want to write. Yes or no? Right? Perfect. Fine. Let's suppose there's no concept of state batching. There's no concept of anything. There's a common person's perspective. From the common man's perspective, let's understand what might happen. If we assume that whatever we have understood until now, as soon as this function will be executed, it will trigger a re-render, right? Similarly, second time when this will be executed, it will trigger a re-render, because set methods are supposed to do that. This will trigger a re-render, this will trigger a re-render. So from the common man's perspective, it should trigger a re-rendering 4 times. Maybe not, I don't know. But you have to understand one thing here. There's one factor that we have to keep in our mind. React waits until all code in the event handler has run before processing the state updates. That's what we mean by state batching. So it's not going to be like this state will be executed, then this state, then this state. No. Unless and until inside this function handler, this is a function handler because I'm calling this function on click or on any event. It's called function handlers. So React will wait until all code in the event handler has run before processing your state updates. I will talk about all those scenarios. Pay attention here. Don't ask any questions at this point of time. Let me complete the state batching concept and state scheduling. Then I will answer all those questions. Okay. We need to understand one very important point over here. That in this particular case, my event handler, the function handler that we have, it is supposed to have multiple state updations. But that's not how it happens. Always remember that whenever your code sees a state setter function, it does not immediately execute it. No. But it schedules it for later on. It is asynchronous, as someone said. Leave asynchronous. Let's use schedules. It schedules the state updation for later. Okay. And this concept is called state scheduling. That immediately my states won't be executing. Immediately it won't trigger the re-render. No. But it will check whether this whole code inside this function handler has been executed or not. So what will happen? It will schedule it for later on. So it creates kind of a queue for it. That's what we mean by queuing the state updates. So this set count will be here. This set count will be here. this set count will be here, and this set count will be here. So I am here in this case creating a queue of state updates. Am I clear? And when now this will be executed one by one. At this point of time, since re-rendering has not happened, unless and until whole code will not be executed, then only re-rendering will happen. Now you guys tell me one thing, that once this will execute, because they are in part of queue, they are in a queue. At this point of time, what is the current state? Count is equals to 1, right? Now when this is executed, count is equals to count plus 1. For this set state method, count becomes 1. Sorry, count is equals to 0. Initial value is 0, not 1. Over here, count becomes 1. But does it do re-rendering? Does it update the state? No. It does not update the state. It does not do a re-render. It does not do that. So at this point of time, we need to understand, even though this will be executed over here, it will be executed here, but it will not trigger a re-render, because all code inside function handler is supposed to execute first. That's how React will treat it. So React does not execute one by one. That first is set count, first is set state method will trigger a re-render. No. Now this will be executed. But don't you think at this point of time, since re-rendering has not happened, what is count in this case? Count is equals to 1. Yes, state got updated to 1, but count for this set count is still 0. So even though state it will make 1, but for this count is equals to 1. So over here state will become 1, but count still becomes 0. Sorry, not 1, 0. So count for this is 0. And finally state is equals to 1. Now this whole batch actually is completed. This concept is called state batching. What is this concept called? State batching. It means that until whole batch is not executed, it will not trigger a re-render. So it always understand one very important point, that multiple state updates, the multiple state updates that I have, it is not like one state will trigger re-render, another state will trigger re-render. No. Until whole batch, it creates batch of those states. This concept is called state batching. Because it's very simple to understand for all of us, that when we talk about a function handler, there might be multiple state updates. Now, if there are multiple state updates, will each state update trigger a re-render? No. Always remember that React in those situations, in those cases, React will create batch of it, group of it. And then unless and until it does not complete execution of all batch, it won't trigger a re-render. So re-render will only happen if complete batch is actually executed. Am I clear? Am I clear? Am I clear? Do we understand what batching means? Give me a quick confirmation in the chat. Everyone, give me a quick confirmation in the chat. Please repeat. Let me repeat. Let me quickly repeat. Coding Geek, I have a simple question to you. And it's a very important concept as well. Very important concept, because as I said, it is asked too much in the interviews. Okay. And that's why we have to understand it properly. So let me repeat. If you look at this particular function handler, leave this board aside. Let's look at it here. Do we all agree there are multiple state updates? Multiple state updates? Yes, sir. So it means there's of course a chance every single time, or 90% of time, 80% of time, that my function handler, in this case handle click, it will have multiple state updates. Now the question is, how does my React behave in that case when there are multiple state updates? If there would have been only one state, it will directly update it, perform the re-render, and we will get our code. But what if there are multiple state updates? If there are multiple state updates, always remember that React will wait. It will wait until all of this code is executed in a function handler. It's not like it will execute half of it, then another half of it. No. It will wait entirely until this whole code is executed, which means it will simply queue the execution. So it will simply schedule it later on. This is executed. It won't execute immediately. It will queue it. That this concept is also called queuing a series of state updates. setting a state variable to queue another render. Then we need to understand one very important point over there, that in this case multiple states are updated, so it is going to queue. Queue means line, that all these state updates will be actually, a batch will be created, a group will be created, where this is state update 1, state update 2, state update 3, state update 4, right? So this is a batch of states, because this function handler has batch of states. And unless and until this whole batch is not executed, then only re-rendering will happen. So React will wait until this whole batch is executed. So when my set count is executed, at that point of time, even though count is 0, but don't you think count is 0 for this as well, for this as well, for this as well? Of course, count is 0 for everyone. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? If you look at this, count is 0 for this as well, this as well, this as well. Why? Because whole batch is not executed. Until whole batch is executed, then count will be updated with whatever it is. Another very important thing which you need to understand here. Let's understand it one by one, how it will execute it. Allow me a second. Let me erase everything here, because there's one use case with respect to what I'm about to discuss. I know it's going to create a batch of it, a queue of it. Let's suppose this is set count 1. Then we have set count 2. We have set count 3. We have set count 4. Right? Now, when this will be executed inside that batch, now batch has been created. Remember, batch is created. Inside my set count, at this point of time, we know count's initial value is 0. Now, when this will be executed, which means 0 plus 1. So basically, what it's going to do, it's going to replace this whole code with set count 0 plus 1, set count 0 plus 1, set count 0 plus 1, set count 0 plus 1. That's what it's going to do. Because for this entire batch, count is equals to 0. But on the same time, there's one another play here, which is that when my first set count will be executed, it will simply tell it set count 0 plus 1. Technically, at this point of time, it makes the internal state is equals to 1. It makes internal state 1. It makes internal state 1. State will become 1. Of course, state will become 1. On the same time, batch has not been updated. It will execute this. This is executed. Now it will try to execute this. So at this point of time, count is still 0. So 0 plus 1 is 1. Again, it makes the internally state 1. Now this will be executed. For this as well, count is equal to 0. 0 plus 1, state will be 1. Internally, state is being updated for the state management, for the use state. Now finally, when this is executed, count is equal to 0 plus 1. So in this case as well, state is equals to 1. Now from here, it will take the latest updation of state. And finally, the whole batch is returning with state is equals to 1. That's why even though if there are multiple count plus 1, count plus 1, count plus 1, it's going to return only 1. Why? Because at last, the whole batch, the state was returned 1. Am I clear? Am I clear? Everyone? And this concept is called state batching. That until this whole batch is not executed, React won't trigger a rerun. It will wait for the whole batch to execute itself. I hope this makes sense. Done? Perfect. Now, what is our agenda? What was it we were trying to resolve? Very good. Yes, coding sake. What is our agenda? The agenda was somehow that even if I have set count 4 times, our agenda was when I click on this 4, it should update it by 4. Now, how can we achieve it? Even by using set count 4 times. Don't you think I will simply tell it? I know when I execute it like this, internally state becomes 1. Somehow I have to run my logic in a way so that second state, instead of updating it based on count, I will tell this set count to update it based on the previous state. So if I somehow tell it in the second set count updation, instead of depending on count, because for whole batch count is 0. But don't you think at this point of time state became 1? So I will simply tell it somehow I will find a way so that I will tell this set count, no, don't do count, don't depend on count, but depend on the previous state. So somehow go and access the previous state and then perform 1 plus 1, which will make the state 2. After that, I will tell this set count, don't depend on count, but depend on the previous state. So it is previous state is 2. 2 plus 1 is 3. Similarly, I will go here, tell it don't depend on count, but go to previous state, make state 3, and then add 1 to it, which will become 4. Do you think that's the logic we should implement? Somehow we should access internally, even in the batch, we should be able to access the state that's being updated. Yes or no? that won't make any difference. That won't make any difference coding, because it is not going to update the state unless and until whole batch is executed coding seek. We cannot do that. Sumit and Cody, we cannot do that. But the logic is somehow we have to tell the second set count depend on the previous state. This set count depend on the previous state. This set count depend on the previous state. And that's actually where we have a concept of updater function. There is a concept that we have, it's called updater function. I am pretty much sure no one has told you that it's called updater function, but it's called updater function. Actually, when we talk about the set state, set count method, we can actually pass another type of syntax. Batching only happens if there are multiple state updates in a function handler. Yes, Saeed. Okay. The agenda is, the problem that we are right now trying to solve is updating the same state multiple times before the next render. So even before next render happens, even before it is displaying the change, somehow in between we want to do something that will actually update the state depending on what it is doing previously. Which means even in between of multiple renders, we want to update the state. This is something very cool, right? That's why this set count actually receives an argument, and that's called updater function. It receives an argument called as, write it down, it's called updater function. What's it called? Updater function. Where we simply tell it set count, and we simply pass an argument over it, which is a function. And when we talk about function, it simply means function like this, right? Function, a callback function. It's updater function, it's a callback function with respect to set count. Where over here you pass any argument. Let's suppose I will pass x. Now this x actually is your previous state. So it means, and then I can simply tell it return x plus 1, maybe x plus 2, x plus 3, x plus anything, whatever. When we say set count, and we pass callback function as an argument, this updater function actually allows us to update the same state variable multiple times before the next render. So we have to understand that we would like to update the same state multiple times before it actually implements the render in the output. That's what we want. That's why we can actually pass another syntax to the set state, where we can pass callback function. Now this is how it's going to work. You will understand in a second. Instead of writing set count is equals to count plus 1, count plus 1, count plus 1, I will simply replace it. I will simply tell it, in this case, please set my count to, and over here I will simply say x colon x plus 1. Okay. Control C, Control V, Control V, Control V. You don't know how it works, it's okay. But at this point of time, if I try to check the output, we can clearly see now, instead of updating it by 1, we can clearly see it's updating it by 4. So this is something that's actually the solution. So we need to understand here, it's like, how is this actually working here, right? How is this working? Let's try to understand it. So this is called an updater function. That when we talk about set count, when we talk about set state, we can pass another type of updation. We can pass another way of updating it. And that's what we mean by updater function. But this is how it's going to work. The callback function that we are passing as an argument here, the argument to that callback function is the previous state. This is how React works. So this is a way of telling React, hey, do something with the state value instead of replacing it. If you talk about the syntax, let's suppose set count. Can I, guys, say that when I say set count with count plus 1, it entirely means replace my current state with this? Does it mean replacing only? Yes or no? It means replacing, right? Replace the count with this value. But now I'm not saying that. This means no, don't replace, but do something with the state. Do something with the state value. There's a difference. Do something with the state value. And trust me, if you sit in an interview and then explain this in this way, hey, when we say set count, count plus 1, it means replace it. And then if we write our syntax like this, it means no, don't replace. Although replace, but do something with the state value. How can an interviewer reject you? How can? I'm pretty much sure you guys already knew this syntax as well. Some of the students, you guys tell me, have you ever explained this callback function as now agenda is not to replace but do something? Of course, that you didn't know that. So that's something that's the perspective that we want to have on this React over here. Now, how is this going to behave? How is this going to work, right? How is this going to work? I will again, state batching is still there. I will simply go and create batching. So in this case as well, batch will be created 100% of time. But in this case, am I saying count plus one? No, I am saying depend on previous state. Now, what is the previous state? X is equals to 0 when the initial render will happen. Now, X and return 0 plus 1. So what is my current state in this case? State becomes 1. When next time this is executed, at that point of time, what is my previous state? It's 1, not the count. I am not telling you to depend on count. I am telling you to depend on previous state. So at that point of time, it's 1. So 1 plus 1 is 2. So state becomes 2. Second time, when this is executed, at that point of time, in previous state was 2. So in that particular case, it's going to add 2 plus 1. So state becomes 3. So state becomes 3. Then finally, when this is executed, it depends on previous state. At that point of time, I simply tell it depend on previous state, return previous state plus 1, which is 3 plus 1, it becomes 4. So state becomes 4. And finally, this whole batch, once this whole batch is executed, state at last is 4 and it will update it by 4. Am I clear? I need a quick confirmation in the chat and then we'll move forward. Quick confirmation. Everyone must reply. Every single student must reply. Am I clear? Very good. I am. If I am clear, there are few cases that I would like to actually understand from your side. Very few cases. Let's suppose instead of this, I simply will remove it and I will simply add set, or let me keep it. Let me remove only one. Then finally I will go write set count with count plus 2. Tell me if I click on add 4, what will be the outcome? What will be the increment? Very good. Very good. Come on, guys. What will be the increment? Obed says 2, Akash says 5, 2, 5. Anyone else? Anyone else? Now, answer is 2. Answer is 2. But I want to understand from the people who are saying 5, why 5? Let's understand it. We know that when this event will be called, a batch will be created. That's what we mean by state batching. So I will simply go here, a batch will be created. So first set count will be set here, a queue will be created, another set count here, another set count here, another set count here. Very good. Now in this case, it depends on the previous state of 0 plus 1 is 1. So state becomes 1. Very good. This depends on previous state. So 1 plus 1 is 2. So state becomes 2. Very good. Then over there, state is what? 2. And 2 plus 1 is 3. So state becomes 3. Very good. But then when this set count is updated at that point of time, it does not depend on previous state. It depends on count, which is 0. Don't you think for the entire batch, count will be 0? Right? So if count is 0, 0 plus 2, it means at this point of time, I'm simply telling you to replace the count with 2. So automatically state at this point of time becomes 2. And what is the final outcome of it? It is 2. So state will be updated by 2 only. It won't be updated by 5. To all the students who said 5, am I correct? If I go right now to my output, click on this, you can clearly see now updation is happening every single time by 2 only. Am I clear? Very good. If we are clear with this, I have few other scenarios. One last scenario over here. If I go here, instead of having it like this, I will simply replace it. I will simply say set count with count plus 2. Right? Then I will simply go here and say set my count with x and tell it to return x plus 2. Tell me what will be the outcome. Tell me what will be the outcome. Please make sure you like this video right now. Come on, guys. What will be the outcome? Then what is the You will understand that, and you will understand this here because we are going to see real examples of it as well. Like what is the requirement of depending on the previous state? Like in what are those use cases? We will discuss all those as well. Don't worry about it. So what will be the output of this? 3, 3, 4, 4, 3, 3. Think about it and tell me. Think about it and tell me. Let's create batch for this. We know batch will be created. So I will simply go create a batch for it. Now, at this point of time, there are only 3 set counts. So set count 1, set count 2, set count 3. In this case, it depends on the previous state. So over here, state will become 1, right? State will become 1. Then this will be executed. It does not depend on previous state. It simply replaces it. So state will become 2, right? State will become 2. Then over it depends on the previous state. What is the previous state with respect to this set count? 2. So 2 plus 2 is 4. So state is equals to 4. So it is supposed to add 4 to it, not 3, right? Let's see. Let's see. So if I right now go to my output here, and if I refresh my page, click once, you can clearly see it's updating it by 4. Simple logic, right? Simple logic. Because you have to understand it as a batch. Execute it as a batch, you will automatically get an idea. Am I clear? Do we understand state scheduling, state batching, state queuing, and state and depending on the previous state? What all of those things are? Everyone? Am I clear with this? All of these things? Done? Done? Perfect. I am, right? This one last concept that we are going to discuss related to state, and then we will see examples of all of these things which we have discussed. State scheduling means that whenever I have multiple state updates or even one only as well, it does not immediately execute it. It schedules it for later execution. That's what state scheduling means. That immediate execution won't be for a state setter function. It will schedule it. Okay? That's what happens. That's what we mean by state scheduling. There's one last theoretical concept related to state, and then we will move forward. If you can see as of now, in this state variable, I have stored 0. But can I always store numbers as the initial value? Like, will my state always have numbers? No. It can contain string as well. It can contain what is called array as well. It can contain boolean as well. It can contain object as well. It can contain array of objects as well. It can contain any kind of data. The point is that you can store any kind of JavaScript value in state. And that's what we actually mean by. That's what we mean by. Come on, guys. Anyone? Mutable. Mutation. Few data types are immutable. When we talk about with respect to JavaScript, when we talk about numbers, strings, boolean, these kind of values, when we talk about, they are immutable in nature, right? But if we talk about we can store any kind of JavaScript value in state, it's called a mutation. It's called a mutation. I will come to that later on because right now we don't have deal with objects. We will understand React forms. Then we will see how objects are stored, how arrays are stored, all of these things. Although we can do that right now as well, but it will waste our time because we have to repeat the same thing. So let's ignore this. When we talk about storing, although it's not, mutation is not actually about storing any kind of value, no, but storing those kind of values which are supposed to change, right? In those timers, the values are going to be in our state in a way, so they are mutable in nature. That's what we mean by mutation actually. For example, I have an input value, form. Inside the form, the value is always supposed to change, right? I read Adfa, Rashid, Dar, something like that. So at that point of time, the idea is that our agenda is to change the contents of objects itself. That's what we mean by mutation. But I will come to that mutation later on, okay? Those types that are supposed to change, they are mutable, right? We know that, right? Coding C, perfect. So we will take a break of 10 minutes now, shall we? So let's take a break of 10 minutes. Then I will come later on updating objects in state and what is mutation with respect to that. I will talk about that later on. But as of now, we will take a break of 10 minutes. And please do not leave the class. Today, I can see only 36 students here, 35 students here, which is not that good a number. It breaks my heart sometimes because the amount of hard work that I do for this specific batch. I try to arrange interview sessions and all those things, and yet I do not get the result that I want. So that's something very heartbreaking for me. But let's see what we can do. I need some help from few of the students that will help me in removing some students from our WhatsApp group who are not part of this group. They are just there to just be there and just you know uh, behave like a participant, nothing else. And I don't want that, right? So let me help. Please help me in that case. So we'll take a break of 10 minutes as of now, and then we will continue our class. Okay, perfect. See you guys after 10 minutes. Bye. Hey guys, hi everyone, welcome back. I hope I'm audible as well as visible. Am I? Govin, let's start removing those students. All the students who are not serious, I don't want them in that WhatsApp group. Okay, let's remove those students. So you can share me on my WhatsApp those numbers. I will start removing them. Okay, perfect. See, if there is any time issue, we can work on that. That's not the problem. Like maybe class timings are not at correct time. We are continuously changing the schedule of our class. We can work on that. That's not an issue, right? So I guess we can start our class. So we have learned most of the concepts of React. We are learned most of the concepts of our state, and those are the concepts as of now that we are going to use to move forward. As of now, let's create small web application. Small, not, but basically few things that we can use actually related to React, and try to understand where we can use state. As of now, you need to understand whatever we have learned related to React state. We have a small picture of state, like where I can use. It's about dynamicality. I will use it in H1 tags, H2 tags, and all those things. No, that's not the that's not the only place where we will use state. States can be used anywhere. You think of anything, it can be a state. For example, I will create a file, and I want to create simply one small project, and it's called theme changer. And usually, when I used to be a fresher and when I used to sit in React interviews, this is the question that was asked to me. Hey, create a theme changer for me, but using state, using use reducer, using context API, using Redux. So that's how the question goes. It's not like theme changer is a, it's a very simple question, right? But don't expect that they will ask you this theme changer only one using one way. They want to test your knowledge, and this is one of the very commonly asked questions. Say implement theme changer using state or using context API. Later on, we'll understand those concepts. So let me simply go create a RFCE, a component out of it. This is what we want to create. We simply want a web application. On that web application, we want to have a button. Okay. And that button should simply say dark mode, light mode. Now I will simply go say dark/light mode. And in order to make this button visible in the output, I have to call it. So let me remove the counter now because I don't need this counter here. I want to call my theme changer component here like this. And let me remove this as well. Done. Now think about it. Please try to understand this. Please try to understand this. There are multiple ways of implementing theme changer. First of all, let's understand what theme changer is. As of now, if you go here, I simply want that when I click on this dark mode, right now the background of this particular container is white. As soon as I click on it, it should be black. As soon as I click on it, it should be white again. So I want to toggle the behavior of dark mode and light mode. Now it's not about this project. Like this project is very simple. I can implement it in one line of code, but that's not the point. The point is understanding where can we use state. Now, what is the first way? You will simply say, sir, do one thing. For this div, let's implement a class. Okay, let's implement a class. And let's make this by default over here dark, right? So what am I trying to do? I'm simply making a class name as dark here. And after that, I will create a file. Let's suppose I will simply say theme.css like this, in which I will design this dark class like this. And over here, I'm simply going to say background color as black. And after that, I'm also going to say the div that I have. For div, please make its height as 80vh. And also width is already 100% as already by default, right? And I already have implemented a CSS here. Now I want to import it here. Always remember, import CSS without any alias, without any name directly. So I will simply say /theme.css. It has imported the CSS file. Now there's already a class. And remember, inside our JSX, we don't have class, but there's class name. We don't have class. Class is in HTML. Attribute name class. But over here, it is class name. Now if I go here and if I see there is dark mode implemented, now what do we want? We simply want that when I click on this, it should be white. When I click on this, it should be black. Right? We will discuss that later on because it's not about CSS right now, coding seek, right? So when I click on this, it should be simply light. It should be made dark. So what I will do is I will go here and I will implement one other class called as light. And over here, I will simply say background color should be hash FFF, meaning white, right? Now, don't you think that the logic says that when I click on this at that point of time, toggle the class names for this div? Like in one case, if it is dark, make it light. If it's light, make it dark. So if we are able to toggle the class names for this div because of a click of a button, we solved our problem. The answer is yes. And remember this point, note it down. Whenever you need dynamicality, it means state in React. Any kind of dynamicality, it is state. In this case, what is the dynamicality? Changing the background color of this container. And when we say changing the background, it means dynamicality because live website is live and we want to change some behavior. It is dynamicality. It is state. So I will simply go say constant and let me simply say BG color is the name of state, comma, or since this is a class name, so let me simply say C name. Then comma, set my C name is equals to, by default, the initial value over here is going to be what it's going to be. Let's say light by default. So over here, I am creating a state. Then I am simply telling it light. Now Govind gave a little bit of suggestion here. One of the very cool suggestions. Sir, let's use class list. Can anyone tell me what class list is? If you remember, inside our document object model, there's a property that we can implement on a particular element called as class list. It returns us an array of classes that are part of that particular element. But as we said, we don't use DOM methods here. There's nothing that we do related to DOM, right? This state, we use state. That's it, nothing else. We cannot use class list dot add, class list dot remove, or class list dot toggle. We cannot do that. That's not allowed. Although we can, if we want, we can, but we won't. Now over here, this light is supposed to be my class name. So over here, I am going to go and I am going to simply tell it, make the state as CNAME. Yes or no? So CNAME. Here comes my first point, that you can automatically see that in our previous case, our state was the content which was visible on a website. In this particular case, our state is a class name. That's why I said states can be anything. Now, what is it supposed to do? It is simply supposed to go here and on this on click, I will simply tell it call a function which is called handle click. Let's suppose something like this. And let me call this function and let me define a function here. So function like this, and over here I will simply tell it set my CNAME to at this point of time, let's say dark, right? Although there's some issue, okay, handle click, okay, there's a brackets missing, so bracket. So by default it's light, and we can see by default the CSS that I have implemented here is light and then dark. So now if I go here, it changes the class over there. When it changes the class, automatically it means it changes the state over there. When I click on it, it changes the state, which means it changes the class. And when it changes it, we can clearly see it makes it like this. Wonderful. But on the other hand, as of now, if you look at this particular code, if you look at this particular type of code that we are implementing, it's very important for us to understand there's only one static change that we are doing, which is we will be able to change it only once. But is that what we want? No, we want to change it continuously. So when I again click on it, it should make it light. When I again click on it, it should make it dark, right? So in that particular case, what is the simplest answer? The simplest answer is I will use if else. I will simply tell if my CNAME is equals if it is light. If it is light. At that point of time, simply make it dark. Else go there and make it the set name as light. Simple thing. If else conditional rendering. Conditional, although it's not conditional rendering, it's conditional state thing that we are doing. Rendering is when we implement conditions here, right? So we are using if else normal, that if CNAME is light, whenever this is called, this function is called, check at that point of time. If my CNAME is light, in that particular case, make it dark, otherwise make it light, right? And now if I go here, refresh my page, it is light, it becomes dark, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark. So we have implemented toggle behavior wonderfully. But on the same time, don't you think that text over here, this text should be also toggling behavior? When the background is light, the text on this button should say dark mode. When it is dark, the text on this button should say light mode. That makes sense. So it means the content on this button is also dynamic in nature. And whenever there's anything dynamic, make it state at this point of time. So I will go here and make another state. So constant, let me go make text, comma, set my text. Then it is equals to use state that we have. And over here, I will simply make it by default, since by default, the state of CNAME is light, so I will make it dark. Now over here, instead of dark mode, light mode, what am I going to do? I am going to make it text state. We will do that. That's why I'm going to go in few minutes. So I have text mode. Now, what does it mean? It means at this point of time, you can clearly see the text says dark mode. Why? Because background by default is light, so text is supposed to say dark. Now, when I click on this particular button, at this point of time, you can clearly see the background becomes dark. But if you look at the code, the button text says dark. Should it say dark or light? Guys, should it say dark or light? Of course, it should say in this case light. Because background is dark, now we should be having light mode here, which means we have to update this state as well. It means I will simply tell it, if my CNAME is light at that point of time, set my CNAME to dark, but also set my text to light. Similarly, over here, I will simply tell set my text to dark. One thing. Similarly, I will go here. Now, if I refresh my page, you can clearly see we have implemented dark mode, light mode properly. Both of them are working. Fine. This is one way. So we have completely understood here that at this point of time, we have understood that we can implement our class, state as class name as well. This is one way. So let me simply control C this and put it inside my app.txt. Done. Now over here, instead of making my class name is here as state. Now there's something else that we have to actually understand here. How can we implement inline CSS in React? If you remember in our HTML, we can implement inline CSS however we want. But how can we implement inline CSS in this case? We can use style attribute wonderfully. But always remember, in our inline CSS, in our React JSX, we have to pass key value properties as an object. So whatever those properties are, they are supposed to be passed to the particular component as an object. Am I clear? As an object. Which means I will pass another curly brace. Now, external curly brace, if you look at it, it is JSX syntax. Internal curly braces for object. So I will simply go write the properties. For example, I will simply go say background color. So background color is colon, and let's suppose it is simply red. Whatever the property at this point of time is. So you need to understand we have to implement our properties in a manner as a key value pair, which means as an object. That's the syntax of inline CSS. Okay. And now if I go to my output and if I refresh my page, you can clearly see it's red, which means style has been implemented. Let's suppose I want to implement some other property. Maybe there's an h1 tag, and for this h1 tag, it simply says text as Adfar Rashid. And I want to make its color as blue or something else. So I will simply pass comma. If you remember in your HTML, you separate the multiple properties with a semicolon. Remember that? Semicolon. But since we know object structure, object syntax, key value properties, and we have to pass comma over there because it's an object. Over here, I will write color colon. But when we say color is also a syntax. So I will simply say red, or let's say instead of red, let's say I will simply say white. Done. And if I go right now to my output, you can clearly see white is the text. Wonderfully. Maybe I want to increase the font size of it. I will again put comma. I will simply say font size. Always remember that whatever properties we have that are combination of two words, you must write it as camel case. Font size. If in your CSS, if you remember, it used to be font middle score size, background middle score color, but over it has to be camel case. Okay, in inline CSS. So font size is equals to. If you remember over there, you used to directly write 10 pixel. No, since it's a string, there's a px with it. You have to wrap it inside double quotes. So whatever your syntax of objects is, that's what you have to follow in inline CSS. And now if I go here, you can clearly see it's 10 with the pixel because you can clearly see now it looks good. It's 10 pixel only. Wonderful. So this is how we will implement our properties. Now my question that I'm actually talking about here is that if you look at this particular background color, because I want to talk about only background color here. Now this background color is red, but what do we want? That by default it should be white, but when I click on this button, it should be black. So it means even the property inside some style can also be a state. So I will simply go say BG color. Instead of saying CNAME, I will simply say BG color. Then over here, I will simply say it's supposed to be BG. Sorry, it's supposed to be set BG color. and then by default it's supposed to be white. So let me simply go here and let me simply implement white. Done. Now over here, the default value, what will be the default value? The default value over here will be BG color, right? So the agenda, as I said, is not actually about creating theme changes. The agenda is to give you an idea where can you use state. States can be implemented even as a class name, as an ID name. It can be any value. Wherever you need value, value can be state. Even in the inline CSS style, value can be state as well. That is the agenda that I want to make you understand. Now over here, let me remove this if else because I don't need this if else right now. And we can clearly see by default it's white. And if I go in the output, it's white. If I go and make the initial state as black, you can clearly see initial value is over here black. Wonderfully. But now what do we want? I want to make it white. And then whenever I call it, I will simply tell it if my BG color by default is white, at that point of time, please go set my BG color to black and on the same time set my text to light. Else go over here and then I will simply go set my BG color to white and then set my text to dark. And now if I go to my output, you can clearly see it's properly working, right? It's properly working. Although you can see when it's black at that point of time, text is no longer there. So it means this color of this particular H1 tag is also supposed to be dynamic. So you can add state to this as well, but I think you can figure out that. So you can clearly see it's properly working. Am I clear that states can be used anywhere? Yes or no? States can be used anywhere. Yes or no? Give me a quick confirmation in the chat. Quickly. Done? Perfect. Moving forward. Now, if you look at this particular code, at this point of time, let me create one small thing here. Okay, because that's very necessary for us. When the background color is white, the text is black. And if I refresh my page, when I click on this, background becomes black, my text vanishes. Don't you think it automatically means even the style of this particular H1 is supposed to be dynamic? The color of the text is supposed to be dynamic. That's how it will support and make sure the proper web application is functional, it's properly visible, user interface is proper. Of course, yes. So I will implement style here as well. What am I going to do? I'm going to implement style. So let me implement style quickly. And of course, we know that it is supposed to be also a proper state. So for that also, I will create state. I'm deliberately making it little bit complex. Although it's not complex, I'm deliberately adding more states to it, which I do not want. So over here, what I will do is I will simply go here and I will simply add color, comma, set my color. Okay. Is equals to what? Is equals to use state. And by default, since the background color is white, by default, it is supposed to be black, right? Do you understand why I am writing initial value as black here? Because by default, the background is white, so it's supposed to be black. So I will simply go here and implement color. Color is equals to colon, and it is my color state. Color is equals to color state. And then over here, I will simply tell it when my BG color is white, set my BG color to black, also set my color to white. Similarly, over here, when it's otherwise, do something like this. And if I right now go to my output, you can clearly see now this is also working, right? Color for my H1 tag is also properly working. Now there is something that you need to understand. We at this point of time created 3 states because in my web application, there were 3 dynamicalities that was supposed to happen. Please try to understand what I'm trying to say. If you look at this particular problem that we have, you need to understand one small thing, which is at this point of time, if you look at it, there were 3 dynamicalities that were present. And the worst design in React is the number of dynamicalities, meaning those many number of states you will create. That's the worst design. But there's also a proper connection between this. How? If you look at it, if you look at this particular example that we created, don't you think dynamicality is inside this button, dynamicality is inside this background color, dynamicality is inside this color, but all of them are related to only one action, right? When you perform one action, dynamicality happens in all, change happens in all. They all are linked to one change only. Do we all agree with that? Do we all agree with that? Yes or no? Right? Whether we talk about the text on a button, whether we talk about the color on a text, or whether we talk about background color, they all are linked. Why are they linked? Because they all depend on one action only, which is click. Which is click. So all the dynamicality happens over here. Whenever there are multiple dynamicalities that are linked to one action only. In that particular case, this is not what we will do. So this is not what I am going to do. In that particular case, I will implement only one style, only one state, sorry, only one state. Let me go here. Let me set up the design first of all. I have a div, although let me implement the height. So for that, I'm going to go here and I'm going to implement dot slash theme dot css because I want to implement height. Now, I know for this particular case, there are three dynamicalities that are supposed to happen. So, for example, for this button, it says right now dark mode. There's an h1 tag. For that, I had a color property. So, I will simply say hello world. And I know for this div, there's supposed to be a background color. Now, I will simply try to implement style here like this and so on and so forth. For this h1 tag, there was style, right? Like this. Now, in this case, I will no. In that case, if you see coding geek, we can destructure the states into single state. No, that's still something else. That's not what I'm talking about. At this point of time, if you look at what we are trying to do, all the state changes, they are linked to each other to one click. At this point of time, always create a state which is Boolean in nature. So I will simply say condition, comma, set my condition. And then this is going to be equals to use state. And over here, I will simply pass by default true to it or false. It depends on you, whatever you want to pass. But it is Boolean in nature. Okay. Then I know that on this button, I'm simply supposed to have an on click event. Now, whenever I have on click event at this point of time, I will simply say handle call my function called as handle click. Done. And I will simply tell it Control C. Let me try to copy this function and let me define the function here. So function, my handle click like this, like this, like this, like this. And I will simply tell it over there. If my condition is equals to true, at that point of time, make the set condition as false. After that, else, go there, make the set condition as true, right? So I simply want to toggle it. Like by default, if it is true, make it false, otherwise make it true, right? Yes or no? Please add symbol also for dark and light mode. What does that mean? How to add show? What does that mean? So you can clearly understand. Do we all agree that in this case, whenever I'm going to click on it, it's toggling the value of condition? That if it is true, it's making it false. And if it's false, it's making it true. Yes or no? Right? Do we all agree with that? Everyone. Very good. But instead of writing if else like this, it's always better that whenever we have to toggle a Boolean value, we will simply say not condition. Like this. Set condition is equals to not condition. So I am replaced entire if else with this line of code. So if condition is true, make it not true, means false. If it is false, make it not false, means true. So this is also toggle behavior. So at this point of time, if I simply go tell it to give me what my condition is, you will see true, false as soon as I click. Now over here, I will simply say make the background color. Make the background color. And please check. Right now, in this case, if the condition is true at that point of time, if the condition is true at that point of time, make the background color as black. Otherwise, make it white. Conditional rendering now. This is what we mean by conditional rendering. I am simply telling it the background color that I have. If the condition is true, make it black, otherwise white. Do we all know what ternary operator is? Do we all know what ternary operator is? Yes or no? Everyone knows it, right? Perfectly fine. Similarly, over here, this dark mode that I have, I know that this part of this button, this text part, is also condition based. So in this case as well, I will write my JSX. If my condition is true, at that point of time, since I am making it black, at that point of time, make it dark here, and then I'm going to make it light. Conditional rendering. Similarly, for this H1, go and check its color property. I will tell it if the condition is true at that point of time, make the color as black, otherwise make it light. Make it white, sorry. Colon? Note of interrogation? and then colon, make it white. So don't you think in this particular case, I have again achieved the same output, but in a far better design? In a far better design. Why? Because now only one state is involved in all of those things. Why? Because they all are linked to each other. So now if I right now go to my output here, and if I, as of now, it says dark mode, although it's already dark mode, so it means we have implemented the text vice versa. So over here it should be light, and over here it should be dark, and also over here it should be white, and over here it should be black. So now if I go, in this particular case, we can clearly see it properly works again. Properly works. So by just defining a single state, we have resolved our problem. And this is, of course, a better design, because it does not matter how many dynamicalities we have, but all of those dynamicalities are linked to each other. So whenever we have such kind of situation inside our React, it's better to design only one state, but make that Boolean in nature. And then we know we can use ternary operator, conditional rendering everywhere, and we can solve it. So conditional rendering can be used when we have multiple states inside. Conditional rendering can be used anywhere. I will teach you conditional rendering in 2 minutes. But I hope this makes sense. Am I clear? Do we guys understand? If we understand, please make sure you like this video right now. If you have not already subscribed, please subscribe the channel right now, and share it with your friends who need the content. Please do that. Okay. So I hope this design is clear. Let's move forward and let's understand one very important point, which is conditional rendering. I will teach you conditional rendering over here only. So RFCE. I have an app, right? And when we talk about in conditional rendering, is there a way to not use internal style and rely on external one? We will, Akash, there's a concept in React that actually allows us to understand CSS properly. There's going to be a proper class with respect to that. When we talk about style, how do we add style in CSS? What are the different things that we need to keep in mind? We will do that, okay? We will do that. But at this point of time, let's understand one thing. What do we mean by conditional rendering? Conditional rendering means that in my output, display something based on a condition. Based on a condition. For example, if you check the web application, let's suppose there's a nav bar here. When I click on home, some content is here. When I click on about, some other content is here. When I click on blog, some other content is here. So the content that I'm able to see at the bottom, it depends on the condition, how I'm clicking, on which nav button I'm clicking. So conditional rendering is the most important thing in React. Although very easy, but important. Why? Because you can create a single page application only if there's conditional rendering involved. If you do not conditionally import, conditionally display your components, conditional rendering is not possible. Sorry, a single page web application is not possible. So conditional rendering plays a very important role. Let's understand what conditional rendering is. I will go and I will create one other component. Let's suppose the component name is adfar. Okay. And I will simply go and inside this adfar, I will simply tell it to return. What is it supposed to return? It's simply supposed to return a div tag like this. And over it's supposed to return p tag, where there are a lot of text. So lorem 100. Done. So it's a good amount of text that we have. Now over here at this point of time, I will simply call my adfar like this. Done. Similarly, let me copy the same component that we have here and let me repeat it here. I will call and name this. Let's suppose the component name is Sumit. Okay. And let me call my Sumit here as well. So I will call my Sumit. Like this. Done. Not Summit, but Sumit. And also I will go here. I will simply say H1, and inside the I will say adfar component. Done. And also here I will simply go have H1, and I will simply say Sumit component. And right now, if I try to see the output, we can clearly see both of the components are visible, right? But let's suppose this is my one page of my web application. This is my another page. So what I want to do is I simply want that over here inside my H1, I want simply a nav bar. Okay. And in this nav bar, there are two buttons. Number one is saying adfar component. Another one is saying, in this case, I'm simply saying another button. And this button says another component, which is Sumit component. So let me simply go here and let me simply say Sumit component. And at this point of time, you can clearly see there are two buttons. Now, what is it that I want? I simply want one small thing here. When I click on Adfar, at that point of time, Adfar's component should be displayed. When I click on Sumit, Adfar's component should be removed and Sumit's component should be displayed. So can I say the problem that we are trying to resolve is that we want to display a condition based on we want to display a component based on a condition. Can we say that? Yes or no? That we want to display a component based on a condition. Of course, yes. Right? That's what we mean by conditional rendering. That's what we mean by conditional rendering. That we want to display some part of the UI based on a condition. Now, when we say conditional rendering, it's not just about UI. It can be style as well. It's not just about, content. It can be style as well. It can be anything, but based on a condition. Now, whenever we have conditional rendering, or in this case as well, don't you think it depends on a state? But I can do it without state as well. Leave these buttons aside. Let me define a variable where I will simply say condition is equals to true. And now over here, in order to implement conditions, in order to implement conditional rendering, there are two ways that we use. One is called a ternary operator, another one is called an and operator. So I will remove Adfar and this. I will simply implement JSX because I have to write logic. And in this case, I will simply that if my condition is true, you can write is equals true, but if you don't write it means true, then I will write note of interrogation. In that particular case, display Adfar. Then over here, otherwise, go and display Sumit. Now, at this point of time, if you look at this particular code, I know my local variable is true, so it will display Adfar only. So if I right now go, there's Adfar only, right? Which means I am displaying this component based on a condition. If somehow, due to some action, I make it false, you can clearly see that in this particular case, my Sumit's component will be displayed. Done. But I don't want to do it like this. I want to do it based on a state. So I will simply go and remove this particular component that I have and make it condition, comma, set my condition is equals to what? Is equals to use state like this. And let me make it by default true. Then over here, whenever I click on Adfar's component, I will simply say on click. On click, let's go and let's make simply my set my condition to true. Done, which is by default. And then on click of this particular function, at that point of time, please call a function and make the set condition as false. Now, since it's a what is this called? State. Now you can see we can actually properly display a component based on a condition. Now, this is what we mean by conditional rendering. Am I clear? Am I clear, guys? Am I clear? That we are displaying some content on my UI based on a condition. This is what we mean by conditional rendering. Now, one way is we can display it using conditional ternary operator. But what does ternary operator mean? Ternary operator means that whatever expression you write, if the expression returns true, then in that case, this will be executed. The content between note of interrogation and colon. So this is related to true. If the expression returns false at that point of time, so this will be executed. So this is related to false. That's what conditional, ternary operator means. That if condition is true, the first expression will be executed. If the condition is false, second expression will be executed, right? Very good. But second way of conditional rendering, which is mostly used, even more than whatever this ternary operator is, it's called, what is called, and operator. Now, and operator only deals with if the condition is true. So let me try to comment this code here. So if I comment this, I will go and I will write one another statement here. That if the condition is true, then and. If the condition is true, then and. At that point of time, please display Adfar component. If the condition is true, please display Adfar. What does and mean? And simply means that I am going to deal with only if this returns true. I'm not going to deal with false part of it. I have only that the right part will be executed only if this is executed. Right part will be executed only if this is executed. If this is not true, if this expression does not return true, right part won't be executed. Since by default it is true, so we know it will display actually Adfar only. So let me refresh my page. It displays Adfar only. If and only if, exactly. If and only if condition is true, then only display the right part. So this is what we mean by condition and conditional rendering. On the same time, now I want to make sure that Sumit is also displayed. But when my condition is false, at that point of time, don't you think I will simply go put not in front of it? not in front of it. So it means not condition. So if the condition is false at that point of time, returns Sumit. So now if I go to my output here, and you can clearly see when I click on this, since condition is being toggled, we can clearly see actually we are able to see conditional rendering even in terms of and operator as well. So these two combined is actually ternary operator in this case, in this example. I hope this makes sense. Do I have any questions, guys? Do I have any questions? Yes or no? Yes or no? Do you have any questions? So let me share the address link. Please make sure that you submit that address right now. And I will also share the address update in 2 days with respect to React. And let me share it first of all. Now, this one small thing that I want to discuss. See, yesterday we took a class and there are only 2 comments there, right? So if you think that you are learning some cool things, I'm giving you the good content in respect, please put a valuable comment there. Like there are 35 students whom I know they are very serious. From those 35 students, at least 20 comments should be every single time on that particular class, right? So please do that. Can we make our custom state? We can make context API, we can make our custom hooks for later on. So when we click on the button only, then the component should be visible by default. There should be no component. When we click on the button only, then the component should be visible by default. There should be now home page will be there now always. Like this is home component in this case. See, if you write a condition like this, it means that since the condition can have only true or false, in that particular case, this will be displayed, right? This will be displayed. You can tell it over here that by default you can make it only true, right? In that particular case, you have to make sure that Sumit and Adfar, they are actually dependent on different states, different variables, not on the condition. Because I am writing my code in a way, if the condition is true, then one of them will be displayed, right? One of them will be displayed. What's the meaning of batching? Batching, Govind, means that when multiple states are updated in an event, the all states will be taken as a batch and all state updates will be executed once as a batch. Unfortunately, that's not enough, Adil. That's not enough. From tomorrow, you are going to get assignments in the Google Classroom that I shared related to React, okay? API is not going to work in production. That news API. You have to find some other API which can work in production, okay? I will try to find one. So I have a small request now. Please, I have shared the address link. Please submit the address, and also once this class ends, it will take you 2 minutes only to put a valuable comment and share it with your friends. Okay, please do that. That's the only request. That's the only requirement that I have from my side. Nothing else. Next class will be on Saturday, and we will have a discussion on our WhatsApp group to determine what is the appropriate time for everyone. Okay, we will see that. And also, I need few students who can help me removing some students because I cannot remove all the students myself. Google Classroom ID means your name, simply your name. Whatever your full name is, that's what Google Classroom ID means. Okay. Do we have any questions, guys? We will see the time because I have my other classes as well on Saturday. Sunday, I don't have any issues taking class in evening, but Saturday, I have some other classes in the evening from 8 to 10. We will see what time it will be better. They will ask you state as well as batching, but in most cases, they will ask you state batching because they know you know state, but they want to know whether you know state batching or not. Okay, so please make sure that you put a valuable comment, you subscribe and share it with your friends. So give me the feedback, copy that feedback and comment it later on. Okay. I will do that. Please remind me it on my WhatsApp coding geek later on. Okay, to add a GitHub repository for this and share it. Okay, please remind me. Thank you so much, guys. I hope you have enjoyed this session. I hope you have understood state properly. Even if you knew things, I hope you have learned something new today. That will also work, Shubham. That will also work. Perfect. Great. Thank you so much, guys. Bye, everyone. Have a great week ahead. I will share some assignments in our Google Classroom, and please make sure you submit them. And if you are not part of Google Classroom, I have already shared the link on my WhatsApp group. You can join it over there. Okay. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much. See you in the next class. Bye, everyone. Have a great week ahead. Thank you so much. Bye. Thank you so much. Bye.